And today we're joined by Justin McSweeney, the host of an insightful interview series called IdeaCast, available on YouTube and Spotify. In IdeaCast, he engages in meaningful conversations with thought leaders and academics in philosophy, cognitive science, and psychology. His series delves deep into questions surrounding meaning, sense making, and purpose. And through these discussions, Justin explores how understanding meaning and purpose can lead to a brighter future for individuals. His work is rooted in the belief that when we make sense of the world, we can truly transform our lives. So, welcome to the show, Justin. Great to have you here.
Hello,
How are
Anu,
you?
and I'm good. Thank you so much for opening up this space for the two of us for a conversation. I appreciate it.
Oh, looking forward to our talk, and it would be great to kind of find out a bit more about yourself, Justin, and about your personal experience with trauma, and how that may have shaped who you are today.
Yes, I'm happy and I'm happy to be candid about it and open things up and hope that people can relate and see a mirror, perhaps.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, perfect. So, can you explain more about your journey?
Well, I could go way, way back, and your show speaks to trauma. And I had been brought into the world by parents who were subjected to abuse as children, and as a result, they were rather dysfunctional. I would to add an evaluation to my life and what I've been through. I'd say is very garden variety. There are different types of trauma that we could define, and I'd say that mine was not acute, but it was more of a sort of long duration, kind of a little instance by instance kind of onboarding of what could be called trauma. I would say more like high drama, more like Machiavellian uh, drama theater and psychodramas and weird, just antisocial behavior. But it was never a singular instance of having been tortured or tormented in a very acute way. So it doesn't diminish what the effects were, of course, what was wrought of that. But I just want to kind of lay that out that there was never this one instance, at least anything that I can recall. So.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, no, thank you. And so, how did you begin the process of sense making, and how did you actually start to find meaning in the difficult experiences that you went through?
Well, it is connected and associated with what I was just saying because as a result of being raised by two dysfunctional parents who divorced when I was 6, and as a 6-year-old, I was quite relieved to know I went and they gave me that, my mother came and gave me that talk, and I was very relieved that they were not going to be together anymore because there was a lot of violence in the house, a lot of bad things happening. And so at 6 years old, I was very pragmatic and I said, oh, thank God. Yeah. They were worried that I'd, like most kids, that, oh, why are mommy and daddy, I was like, woo. So, that was good. And I ended up with the parent who I cannot diagnose them. That's not fair, but to sort of maybe infer that there was a kind of uh what's the covert narcissism or something along those lines. There was just a lot of drama, a lot of psychodrama stuff going on. So that was my environment for most of my life. And as we are conditioned in any culture, we have to respect our parents, love our parents, obey our parents in certain terms. If you look at the Ten Commandments. So there's a lot of pressure to keep a cohesive family structure, connection, et cetera, going on. And that stayed with me into my adult life. And in dealing with this parent, it had become obvious to me after I had gotten married and my wife was on the scene that my wife is enduring some of these cyclical Machiavellian psychodramas and violent, just outburst behavior and things like that. So I made a decision at 33 that would be the end of that relationship, and therein began my journey of trying to sort of make sense of what my childhood was about, what my teenage years were about. My teenage years were very dark, very nihilistic. I wasn't suicidal per se, but I was very self-destructive. I would do really, really reckless things that would likely have gotten me killed if the odds hadn't cashed out to my favor. So fortunately, I lived through all that. A lot of drug use, of course, with a lot of people that self-medicate when they're dealing with that kind of, again, whatever you want to call it, drama, trauma. So that was on board. And in my early to mid 30s, I was going through a reckoning process of having cleaved myself from that relationship and taking ownership of who I was and how that had forged me psychically. And so in doing that, I went through a dark phase again in my 20s were great and my, up into my early 30s were great. I had a good time, but going into my early to mid 30s, the darkness started coming out of me. And in to speak probably broadly and bluntly, the people will either blame themselves for the trauma that's put upon them, or they'll blame the world for the trauma that's put upon them. Well, I happen to be one of those people that lumped it onto myself. So self-destructive behavior started coming up again, anger, a lot of things were coming out in the early to mid 30s, and it put me in a very dark place. And substance use had increased to try to kind of tamp that down and subdue that. And that all kind of culminated in my having had a brain injury in 2011. It wasn't related to substance use, though. It was I'd kind of cleaned away from that and stopped doing that. But I'd had something else, some other vector came in, and I had a chemical brain injury, and it really, really set me back. I lost control of my well, I wouldn't say lost control, but I was diminished in my capacity to understand what people were saying. I had no short-term memory. I had Parkinsonism, where I was tremoring, a lot of neuropathy, pain in the joints, things like that. And it was very scary. And it was kind of one of those wake-up call moments where I had to fight to regain myself and regain my faculties and so forth. So it was a neat experience. It was a sort of master showing up in my life and offering me some opportunities to either become a vegetable, mentally, because I was greatly diminished cognitively, and it scared me, of course. And so I went through that for a couple of years, again, as a result of an not related to substance use or abusive behavior. Ironically, it should have been, but something else intervened. And in that process, I was, at a crossroads, and I got very curious about, well, what is sense, meaning, purpose? Not necessarily in those blunt terms, but, I was asking these broader questions, existential questions, because I had been on an existential precipice. And again, I had to fight for my life at that point, because I was at 41, I was convinced that I was going to end up in a nursing home, because I was just rapidly declining. Again, I couldn't understand what people were saying to me. I couldn't capture memory and hold it. I could barely walk, all these weird things. And I went to neurologists and doctors, and they were just kind of like, they didn't know, they didn't know what was going on with me. So that was really weird. I would think that there would be some clue, but like I said, I just sort of assessed that something other had. We had mold in the house, so it might have been a mold toxicity. I don't know, but anyway. So it took about 5 years to kind of regain some normalcy, where I was somewhat back to my old self, and I rehabilitated myself. I have a passion for horticulture and botany. So my yard, I live in Florida. I have a yard full of tropical plants. And prior to this experience, I knew my collection and the sense of the scientific names and the history of the plant, the where it comes from and all this kind of stuff. So as part of one step of rehabilitation, I went out in the yard and I would look at the plant and I would try to bring up the nomenclature and say, well, what's the binomial for, what's the Latin name for this plant, or what's the scientific, where does it come from? What are its cultural needs? All this kind of stuff. And I slowly would, that was one way I got back online. But the other thing I did was I got really interested in philosophy and psychology and a little bit of spirituality, spiritual light, nothing too specific. But in taking that dive, I just opened up a whole new world that just absolutely fascinated me to no end, because it sated a kind of curiosity, but at the same time, it was a rehabilitating practice to understand mind and understand the psyche and cognition and what makes us tick mentally, and maybe even, retrospectively analyzing where I've come from and what my story is and what I'm made of psychologically or psychically. I use those terms uh, together. So yeah, I'll stop there for a second and see if there's anything you wanted to ask about that. But yeah, that's kind of a nutshell or the thumbnail of what
Yeah.
brought me to this really. Also, I have a very obsessive personality and I'm hyperactive. So that piled on to the fact that I was on this cliff and I could have fallen off, or I could have backed away and taken time to reflect. You know. and
No,
assess.
yeah, absolutely. And it is usually, when you're on that cliff, yeah, you can go either way. And,
Mm.
it's in that moment of decision which can shape your whole life. So what do you think for you was a turning point up on that cliff?
Well, again, I think whatever this illness was that had, been beset upon me at 40, 41 years of age, gave me a choice. And it said, and to confess, from like 13, and again, the 20s were kind of light, but from 13 till that time, I really was ambivalent about living. I didn't care, especially in my teenagers. I did not want to be here. I did not want to live. I was smart enough for myself not to take, well, I did take a gun one time, and I played a little bit of Russian roulette, but I mean, I never really consciously wanted to take myself out, but I'd say, well, if I had an accident, maybe that would, yeah, it would look, people wouldn't, judge me so much or whatever. But for
True.
years, I was just very self-destructive, and I kind of wanted to die, and I didn't really care about surviving and flourishing or any of that. I just kind of went through the paces, and so this was kind of like that, that thing where you have the choice now. Well, here you are. Do you want to live? And you were not going to die. You're just going to be a vegetable. So it's like not even the option you would, had been flirting with for all these years. So that was a motivating device or event, phenomena that really got me thinking and made me value life and value my existence. And like I said earlier, it was a master that showed up for me. And I say that metaphorically. I don't put any strong value on, that being um, reifiable or anything like that. But it was just in an abstract metaphoric sense, it was a teaching moment for me highly motivated me to turn things around and say, this isn't working. You do either, yeah, you need to make a choice. You can just fall apart and have people feed you and clothe, clean you and all that stuff for the remainder of your life, or you can struggle very hard to get back online. And as you can tell right now, I'm probably 98, 96% recovered. I managed in when was that, 2011? So however long that's been, 13, 14 years, to pull myself together and treat myself well. I eat very well now. I don't do any alcohol or booze or anything. That's a nice thing about that chemical brain injury is if I tried to take a drink or puff some dope or whatever, it would be horrible. I mean, I tried that. It's like that reaction was terrible. So whatever happened chemically in my brain, which is just really weird because I'm a hedonist, right? And I loved my drink and I loved it, pot and all that stuff. But if I tried that now, it'd be a horrific internal cognitive experience. It'd feel terrible. It'd just be
Yeah.
absolutely terrible. So that's nice. It keeps me honest, and it's sort of like an intervention in a way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And what I love about, your own kind of purpose and what you're doing out there is just, you're really into philosophy and healing. And I love that. I just love the fact that, you integrate philosophy into healing. So how do you feel like philosophical traditions have actually helped you to actually make sense of trauma?
Hmm. There's been so much richness that's been afforded to me by the exploration of some amazing people, men and women and other genders that think about these questions. You have the existentialists who ask these very deep questions about our beingness. You have people in philosophy of mind who ask questions about what is consciousness, what is our relationship as agential entities, objects that we this is an object, but this is a subject. So what are we in that sense? And what I gained from that was a deep appreciation for the unitary nature of our species struggling. If there's one thing that ties us together, other than the fact that we bleed or that we draw air, is that we all move through these crises, these instances of misfortune and adversity, and how we reclaim ourselves as we move through that crucible is also universal. There are universal reactions to that. So you can be the victim, you can be the martyr, you can be the survivor, you can be the warrior, you can be all these things that move through experience. And I'll stop right here for a second. Anything I say, I want the audience to hear that anything I say is just sort of my perspective. I'm not prescribing anything or dictating anything. It's just kind of a perspective. And so I'll say that that I would heap a bunch of skepticism on if I'm an audience member to what Justin is saying. So just to offer that this is just a perspective, and none of it's really meant to be a claim, a truth claim, or anything like that. So just just as we delve into philosophy, I think it's
Yeah.
ethically responsible of me to just say these are ideas to consider, and
Yeah.
that's it,
Oh, I
and
love that.
let them pass through you. So
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're not forcing,
no,
any
yeah,
information on anybody. So, we're just kind of, I suppose, what we do in a sense is, share information, which people can then choose to take or not take, or,
yeah,
however they want to interpret. And then it's a very individual response. So,
right, right.
100%. So can you talk about psychotechnologies in trauma healing? What's the role of that?
Okay, broadly speaking, psychotechnologies are as banal as what you and I are doing right now. We have these holes in our face and this thing that's developed to taste poison. It's been exapted for sound distribution, the tongue. So we are speaking to each other. The psychotechnology is language, just like writing is a psychotechnology. Symbols and signs are psychotechnology. So they're abstracted technologies. They're virtual machinery or hardware that we use, we've been using for probably 50 to 80,000 years effectively. Probably started out as very primitive. They're cave paintings that go back that far. So these are psychotech and cave paintings are psychotechnology. So anyway, this is a means by which we sense make and we communicate and we can derive meaning from that. So here are these things creeping up in what we're doing. And in all of that, we can sense a purpose in that virtual machinery working for us, with us, and with each other, and with the environment. In our earliest times, we as social creatures in extended families or tribes or whatever, moving around in itinerant fashion, we had to communicate. We had to let people know, where there was food, water, there's threats, these kind of things. And that's, again, part of what our social glue was back then, to keep us together, to keep us safe, and help us thrive and prosper, et cetera. So that is kind of an overview of what psychotechnology is. And then to get to the point of what can psychotechnology do for us in that sense, is I would say that it is so ubiquitous and so uh, it permeates our lives so much that I think without it, that it would be difficult to affect change in an efficient way or a meaningful way. I don't know if that answers your question because I went off on a tangent about psychotechnology, but
No,
if you
that's
want to
good.
ask, re-ask or reframe.
No, yeah, I know. And
Okay.
then, yeah, I was going to ask, what kind of practices or mindsets have you actually found helpful for yourself?
Okay. Well, to get back into the world of philosophy for a moment, one
Mm.
thing, and I kind of said this, that if I offer some ideas, that you hold the idea as just something that's not to be taken in and cultivated or curated into a belief. And so skepticism comes to mind when we talk about something like that. And I very much appreciate skepticism, but it's not the modern cynical kind of skepticism where it's like, oh, I think you're wrong. I think your thesis is wrong or your proposition is wrong. It's more, tell me more about your thesis. Tell me more about your proposition because I want to hear more information. I'm never going to firmly grasp or apprehend that information. I'm just going to hold it in front of me, examine it, and then let it go, but also let it go in a sense that I can retrieve it if I need to make sense further in an investigation of a matter or an issue or a thought or an idea that people are working with. So I love skepticism in that regard because I'm not great at it, but what I hope that I do in life, and I could be self-deceptive in this, is that I don't rigidly hold any beliefs or any knowledge too tightly. I just take ideas and I let them flow again through me or with me. And when they are necessary to bring to the fore to have a discussion, I will employ those thoughts and ideas. But I will not put a stake on a mound and say, I'm going to die on this hill for this idea that I'm defending. No, I'm not married to the idea. If I can update the idea, then I will. And I'm not, again, married or dogmatically attached to something. It shouldn't have that high a value to me. And I think that goes across the board. There's basic survival, like don't do stupid things, obviously. You have to believe that walking in front of a dump truck going 50 miles an hour is a bad thing. That's silly. Yeah, right. But the idea that I believe firmly in X and it prohibits me from accepting Y as being a possibility or an amendment to X, these kind of ideas, I think it would help it helps me, let's say that I don't feel that tension of rigidity. I don't feel like I'm being dragged behind by a particular belief. And I do have beliefs, but I try to keep them loose and free. So that's a good example of how philosophy can inform someone to help them navigate, especially trauma. If I could get on a soapbox and preach for a minute, I think one thing that happens to us when we're traumatized is we can inhabit the role or the archetype of a victim. And we can, in that sense, try to protect ourselves and shield ourselves from being further uh, assaulted or any further grievances or anything else being beset upon us. And that is healthy in small doses. You do want that perspective, but to cultivate it too far and become of the belief that you are a perennial victim, that can be dangerous because then people can manipulate you and then you can be taken advantage of or further victimized without really knowing it because you could have charismatic con artist type people who, kidnap and hijack your thoughts and things like that. And I won't go too conspiratorial with that, but it's just like that's a vulnerability that arises when you attach to a kind of rigid belief. And I picked victimization as an example of myself. I don't say this for anyone else, that I have to be careful with that I don't adhere to a kind of victim consciousness where I can feel righteously indignant about something, or I feel like, oh gosh, here I'm being exploited again, or somebody's out to get me, or this or that. I try to let that go. It's there, but I try not to stir it up too much. So that's a good example, I guess, of what skepticism can do. Is it frees you from the cycle or the potential to sort of trap yourself in beliefs too strongly or too rigidly. We all have to have beliefs, maybe small b beliefs, but not big b beliefs, if that helps.
Yeah, no, and you hit the nail on the head about, victimization and, and hence my podcast, Victim to Victor, because
Right.
so many trauma survivors, unfortunately, become victims of what happened to them, and which is why, they then live in that vulnerable mindset, and which is why they attract more trauma, more
Yeah.
perpetrators who take advantage of them. And it
Yeah.
just seems to be like a constant, pattern. I mean, you only have to kind of go to like a domestic violence charity to see that as well, where partners they're just scared to leave their domestically abusive partners because that's what they're used to. Like they know
Yeah.
nothing else. And then what they'll do, even if they do leave them, then they'll go into another abusive relationship and another abusive relationship. So there you
Yeah.
go. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think that's very
Yeah.
important. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
Yeah, but I just wanted to ask as well, are there any kind of particular philosophers or like schools of thought that you feel offer the most insight into healing from trauma from your experience? Putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, I've not come across anybody who deals specifically with uh and
Trauma.
and this is unusual. Yeah, with trauma, this is very unusual. Now that you're asking this, it's getting me to think for a second that I think what philosophers do is speak more broadly to the human condition,
Okay.
and in that they are speaking very broadly to trauma. So the existentialists in the mid 20th century, 1950s France, people like Sartre and Lacan and or no, not Lacan, Camus and others that were talking about the condition of humanity. And what I like to do is I think that there's a scale invariance, which means we can scale from an individual to a culture to a global our species. That
Yeah.
trauma responds and trauma behaves, whether it's one, 50, a million, or 8 and change billion people. And of course we have to have a lot of caveats attached to what I just said, and we have to qualify a lot of things. But if you'll grant me that charity for just a moment, that when we scale up, the trauma response, the trauma bonding, the trauma psychology is apparent in our global community. War is a good example of that. War is a pathology. and we go to war as individuals. If I'm in a, you just mentioned domestic abuse, and you know, there is a lot of violence in that, and it is a trauma informed kind of. And again, I say this as a person who's not educated, not formally structured in any way, but it's just my experience. I came from parents that were very violent and abusive, and there were battered spouses involved. So I just it's a kind of warfare, it's a kind of pathology, and I see that on a larger scale. That when we wage war with each other, you know, there are political and economic gains to be had by that, and territorial gains, but that's, you know, that's incidental to me. I think the psychic thing that's going on there is that we're locked in this thing because just like going from infancy to say middle age where I am, uh, you onboard trauma in the process. And our species in the last 100,000 years, in our initial diaspora from Africa and radiating out through the world, we onboarded a lot of trauma, you know, a lot of trauma. And it's passed down mimetically through, you know, mimesis and introjection and all these fancy words that are just, we pass trauma on to the generations that go after us, and the filial, if you will. And so that I like to just play with that as a thought experiment and say, well, you know, it's scalable. This thing that we're talking about right now applies very much to the individual, but also it pairs well with the collective, whether we're talking about a small community. And if you think about, you know, tribes or small communities that are impacted by violence, that radiates continuously. I actually interviewed a woman who was a traumatologist, and she spoke to this a lot. She's one of the few PhD traumatologists out there, and her job was to go to when the guns stop firing and the bombs stop dropping. She goes in and works with the people, mostly the civilians who have been just absolutely, you know, blown to bits, and you know, their
Yeah.
families have been butchered, and she's in there trying to help with that initial you know, stopping that process of the radiation of that, or the, again, the mimesis of the violence carrying on into another generation. So she had a lot of interesting thoughts. So that's kind of informs that proposition that I'm putting out there, that, you know, it's a scalable thing. So again, I'm on a tangent, but I think
Oh,
that
it's good.
when we can see the commonality in that and see that we're all together in this kind of thing, and you know, we split ourselves out into cultural identity, and that's great and everything. But I think one thing that would be healthy for us, both as an individual, but as a culture, or a nation, or whatever you want to call it, is that we see our commonality, we see the threads of what makes us human, that, you know, we are all inclined to suffer. I don't think there's probably ever been a human that hasn't had some bit of trauma in their life, or some bit of at least adversity or challenge or drama, or, you know, something terrible, disruptive in their life. I don't think anybody except on TV, you know, like the TV shows that we watch, you know, somebody lives a charmed life or whatever. But I think the rest of us are dealing with that. And we can embrace that in a way. I think we can say, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. I'm not alone, you know, in this. And I had a terrible, you know, not me, Justin, but like an audience member might be saying, oh my gosh, yeah, I had a terrible childhood, or, you know, I had whatever, abusive spouse, partner, that we see that commonality, that common connection that we have. And
Mm,
that might cultivate, you know, empathy is a cognitive faculty, but empathy can go two ways. There are sociopaths who use empathy to understand intellectually what's going on with a person, that they can manipulate them. But there's also empathy that drives people to do the most incredible egalitarian and humanitarian things. And so, in employing our empathy as a means, that we can feel that and know that we're not alone. And that may be step one in, again, Justin's world, for stepping out of the trauma and
yeah,
stepping into a life of transformation and care and help.
very
Has
true.
to be done with a community. That's what you do. That's what I very much appreciate about what you do, is you're there as that person that can help, you know, build a bridge and
Thank
get
you.
them out of that. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. No, thank you. So yeah, just moving on to spirituality. So how has spirituality played a role in your own personal healing journey?
This is where I may come across as being somewhat heterodox, but if you'll follow through with me on this, you can might see where I'm coming from. So I'm a very hard-headed person when it comes to spirituality, and I've been all over the map. My mother tried to foist Catholicism on me as a child, and I was like, you know, I kind of walked away from organized religion. Not that I have anything against it, because I've circled back around to the idea that there are things that can be extracted from any belief system that have value. So that's my fair, to me, fair treatment of religious entities and systems. But what I do, and this goes back to philosophy, it goes back to skepticism that I talked about a minute ago. In Christian doctrine, there was a period of time where there was debate in theology, in Christian theology, about something called apophasis and something called cataphasis, which was the counterpart. And apophatics who practice Christianity will, and I may not be doing full justice to this, but I'll, grant me charity, is they'll say, I know not what I am in the presence of. I know not what I am dealing with, but I know when I am in connection with the divine. I know when I'm in connection with something much greater than myself. And the cataphatic will say, God is a man. He lives in the clouds. He's very angry sometimes. You better yield to what he says, and you better get right. You better reform, repent, whatever it is. And so they know, like they're God's attorney or something. And so they know all these things, but the apophatic is very much steeped in faith, but they let a lot of things go, and they say, I only know when I'm in the presence of something sacred, or I'm in relation with something sacred. So I extract that out of Christian theology, and I ask permission to do that. I try to do that respectfully. And there's also something in theology that's called kenosis. And it was another argument that the early Christians were having about who was Jesus? Was Jesus God incarnate, or was Jesus the Son of God? So they were going back and forth. Was Jesus just a well-informed associate? Blah blah. That's me kind of riffing, but the argument went that if Christ was God incarnate, that God would have to empty himself out to become a man, to become the Christ person. And that kenosis is before Christianity, the Greeks were arguing about these kind of things too. It just got sort of co-opted, and same thing with apophasis and cataphasis. These were all because Christianity is wrought of Greek philosophy. It's wrought of Neoplatonism and other Hebrew traditions and things like that. So it's a Creole. But anyway, to get back to kenosis, it is an emptying out of oneself to be a different vessel, or be a different means of being an agent, or being in that case Christ. In the argument. So I take that out again. And so I use those two little tools along with skepticism, which is to say I can never really know. I can never really know anything. What I do with all that is I put it together, and in my spiritual practice, I go to the bare minimum of what I could consider to be spiritual, which is what you and I are doing right now, which is we're conveying information, we're opening ourselves up to each other and to the audience, and having this conversation in good faith that we want the good, the true, and the beautiful for whatever, whoever receives it. And by beautiful, not so much aesthetically beautiful, but the beauty of the value of life and the sacredness of life. And so it's what I take is not a secular position. It is more of a middle way, to get Buddhist for a second. So more of a middle way position where I cannot ever claim to know what spirituality is or what is going on beyond this system immersed in this environment. And in doing so, I leave open a tremendous amount of possibility, but without ever trying to ask what that possibility is. What I would do is turn back to myself and say, what am I doing with myself in this life? What am I doing with myself as someone who does wish to act in good faith, who wishes to be a helpful person and wishes to contribute to society, to be pro-social, to be empathetic for the sake of being a good caregiver. And I'm not trying to blow myself up here with a bunch of superlatives or anything, but it's what I aspire to. I may not meet that, but I aspire to that. So to answer the question of spirituality, I would say it could be anything. It could be anything that any of us choose. And I think the beautiful gift of, again, this communication and the psychotechnologies that we have at our disposal is that the imaginal and the imagination are perhaps the fount of what is very spiritual about ourselves as humans. No other creature on this planet, and as far as we know in this galaxy so far, or in the universe so far, is capable of that. And I think that is sacred. I think that we can make the choice to be an altruistic, loving, compassionate human being, much like Christ taught, to deliver that to others and to be that representation of all those virtues to others. Again, in the service of people, but also in the service of yourself. So you're doing two things at once. So anyway, that's kind of what I do with it. And I don't want to, I don't really think I want to know beyond that because I seem to be in this environment. We seem to be sort of hermetically sealed on this planet. And if there are things going on beyond that, that's great. But until I die or until some revelation occurs, I'm good with just what I have at hand.
Yeah.
So the technical term I use for myself is I'm an agnostic non-theist. Which is obnoxious, but I like it. An agnostic means there's agnostic, who's someone who says, I don't know. There could be a God, there may not be a God, and I'll just be an atheist in the meantime. And if but
Yeah.
an agnostic says, I have no way of knowing. I have absolutely no way of knowing. And I don't judge other people who say, the cataphatics who say, well, no, 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 I do know. And I'm going to tell you right now because I'm the attorney for this person. I'm going to tell you exactly what's on their mind or the deity or whatever
Mhm.
it is. And to me, that's fine. If that's what they believe, that's good because it's all if they're acting in good faith, true, good, beautiful, whatever, then great.
Mhm.
Whatever means, whatever conduit you need to reach that point,
True.
I can't judge. And the non-theist is just to say, I don't like atheism. I don't like it. I don't say it. I could because it puts them in a dichotomy with theism, and the atheist is trapped in that argument. And to me, it's just so counterproductive. So to be a non-theist is to be non-confrontational. Is to say that I can't define what
Mhm.
a deity might be or what a divine, loving, all yada 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 could be, and I would only grant that my faith would stipulate or dictate that if there is something like that going on, that it's all within me, it's all in my faculties that I have, that I should, consider myself to be, somebody who can make a choice to be a real evil, nasty, antisocial person, or I can be a decent, contributing person who cares about other people and takes care of myself, but also sees the broader picture. So that's it's a long-winded way of saying it, but that's how I try to handle it because I think it is so important that we, recognize that we are spiritual creatures because we have that capacity. We are evolved to that level that, like I
Mhm.
said, right now you and I are communicating. Well, I'm doing a lot of talking, but we're communicating, and that we understand each other. We have this powerful uh, gift to go way beyond just surviving, way beyond just
Yeah.
grazing and reproducing.
It's
So,
true. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I also believe that as well. We're greater than than this physical form. And,
mhm,
we just have this soul which is just divine, and it
mhm,
creates a divine connection with Earth, Mother Earth.
mhm.
And yeah, no, I absolutely love that. And so just for people out there, I mean, what advice would you give to someone who's navigating their own spiritual path?
Oh, I would say that your spiritual practice, if you're spiritually hungry and
Mm,
you're spiritually curious, that your practice can start quite humbly. And it can start with, I mentioned plants earlier. You could fall in love with plants. You could fall in love with the creation of life and seek out, um, the true, the good, and these are such grounding words, and they're very basic and not terribly controversial. Like, who's going to argue against true, good, and beautiful, right? And
yeah.
true isn't propositional true. It's just you stay true to something. That's faith. You're staying
Right.
true, and faith is staying true to something. So we can play around, and I love playing around with semantics and words and things like that. But so if you ground yourself in those three basic principles as a starting point, then you can move on to other things if you want. Just to lens life, to perspectively know life through that lens of curiosity, awe, and imagination. Awe can be a scary word too, because that's awe, the etymology of awe is fear, is terror. But we've diluted it down a little bit to have awe as wonder, and but there's a continuum there. You can be in awe of a meteor getting ready to hit the Earth. Whoa,
True.
yeah.
Yeah.
Last thing you did was whoa, yeah, big bright light. Yeah. So, but I'm being silly. But just
Yeah.
have inside of you, as best you can, cultivate a curiosity and a desire to know, to be.
Mhm.
If we talk about being ensouled creatures, which again I think our incredibly powerful mindedness is in a kind of an ensoulment. That the
Mhm.
vitality of that is so relatable. We can all, nobody, again, it's not controversial that we are capable of so much. You look at the arts and aesthetics and music and creativity, that is the wellspring through the imaginal and the imagination. So I'd say start there. Start with wonder and curiosity and just ask questions. Be that child again that's just, the 4-year-old. It's like, da, 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 5 million questions an hour. Be that person again and embody that sense of yourself. Don't take yourself too seriously when you do that. Have fun.
Yeah.
It's called serious play. When you are in serious, there's frivolity, there's running around acting silly, but serious play is when you want to engage with out there or with others in a way that's playful, fun. It opens you up to possibility. We are very guarded when we're being analytical and cynical and questioning and propositional, but when we open up to the imaginal and we open up to play,
Mm.
that's when the inspiration can come in, and that's when we can become um, insightful and we can become capable of broadening our perspective on things.
Very
So
true.
yeah,
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 very true.
it's a
Yeah, yeah. It's
starting place anyway.
no, I love that. Yeah, and and I think again, you said something quite important there. When we're in, like when we play, when we just are happy and when we're enjoying life, then yeah, that's when your creativity does come. It doesn't come when you're stressed out or anxious, trying to get through life, which is why it's so important to have that time out to actually enjoy your life as well.
Yeah.
And just kind of talking about life, what do you think are the common roadblocks that people face when they're trying to heal from
Mhm.
emotional and psychological trauma?
I'll get nerdy for a second, and I apologize to the audience, but I think it's important, and I'll try to keep it uh, intelligible.
No,
When
thank you.
we I have an obsession with and it's a like a kindergarten level obsession, but I love cognitive science. And one thing they talk about in cognitive science, or one theory that's being kicked about, and it gets debated, but there's something in when we interact with the world, they call it Bayesian inference or active inference. It's a kind of calculus that we do when we are engaged with life, with being, and that is that we have a set of prior beliefs. And when new information comes along, this is basic Bayesian calculus here. So any math nerds out there, you'll get this right away. It's an updating of your prior beliefs, and it's through the presentation or supply of new information that comes to you. I like that idea when it comes to the roadblocks of development, because everything we talked about like 2 minutes ago was like, oh, wouldn't it be fun to be imagined and play? Well, there's a lot of us that are dealing with the walls that are around us of what trauma has done to us, and I was a depressive for years, so I can speak to that where you just don't see it. It's just like, well, oh, good for
Exactly.
you, Justin. I'm glad you can do it, but trust me, I've been through hell,
True.
I've been
Yeah.
through hell, so I can speak lightly about this, but I understand it and I can empathize and connect with that place and that darkness and the shadow. So, first of all, to get Jungian for a second, the shadow is always there. There's deep darkness back here in me. I let it out. I understand to some extent what it is and what it does. But again, going back to Bayesian updating and what cog sci people are talking about, when we learn, we update the prior. And so it is possible. I say all this to say it is possible to move forward frame by frame by frame with experience, even though you seem or feel like you're in this intractable, insurmountable, insoluble kind of mire that keeps you from being curious and being in awe and being in wonder and being in the imaginal and creating space for yourself. This is where community comes in. This is where you can have your helpers with the move the Bayesian updating that comes in, or the active inference updating that comes in, that as a supported person, you have a safety net, or you have a support team that can come with you. Not everybody has the luxury of that. I get that. I understand that. But there are ways. There are ways. Have faith. Just know that there are ways to do that. And so that you can, again, update your priors. You can move frame by frame by frame to develop a new perspective, a new lensing of your outlook on life, the way you see things, the way you intake information, the way you perspectively process information. So, again, my love for the people who talk about cogsci is you can see sort of the basic wiring under the board about how we interact with the environment and the world, and how things like trauma can cloud that. One thing, going back to the shadow for a minute, is and I don't want to sound critical, but there's a lot of times, and you hear this catchphrase, spiritual bypassing, and all these other things, and don't get caught up in it. That there's something called the cult of innocence. And Richard Rohr, who was an enlightened Catholic, speaks about this. He's sort of a Buddhist Catholic, and he talks about the cult of innocence, and it can show up. And it is to say that we are to always be pure, and we are always to be seeking the light, and we are always to be innocent and virtuous, and all these things. Like, no,
No.
one day we can do this, and another day we can do this, and that is to we can be an enlightened, wonderful human being that's kumbaya, and then the next day we can be a real jerk, and we can be moody, and we can hurt somebody or hurt their feelings. It's not that you should, I'm not condoning that or saying we should actively do that, but grant yourself that capacity that you're on this spectrum, that you're in this place, that you can be Jekyll and Hyde, you can oscillate, but be take ownership. If you're bad to somebody or mean to somebody, take ownership of that and catch it and recognize it. That's part of your Bayesian updating. You just say, oh my gosh, I realize now that I was just so awful to that person, and I lashed out at them, and I know where it's coming from. It's that shadow. But see, again, the cult of innocence, we repress the shadow. We repress that demon inside of us that's, was forged in the crucible of abuse and trauma and all these other things. So have a relationship with that if you can, and have a helpful person work with you on that, whether it's coaching or whether it's a therapist or whatever. There's means and methods and modalities that can work with that.
Yeah.
But I just say all that as a cautionary tale based on my own personal experience that you don't want to get too caught up in that transcendent healing, hierarchical ascension kind of thing. Because again, just like I was saying earlier, like don't get attached to ideas of escapism or fantasy or following a kind of particular guru that says, oh, you've got it and you got the light, you got the shine.
Yeah.
That's partially true, but there are checks that you need to do to make sure that you're not just skipping past and suppressing the shadow or suppressing whatever it is. So I'll stop that because you're getting the point at this point. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
cautionary tale that authentic healing, I think, is very it's not slow, but it's methodical. It has to be you have to check in with other people and say, am I self-deceptive? Am I really doing this right? I have to do it. I
Mm,
have to
for
check in with
sure.
myself, and
Yeah.
just, are you
And
really
plus,
kidding yourself?
yeah, and plus it's not linear,
No.
you're gonna have to overcome so many like roadblocks and obstacles along the way, which means, you might even have to go back down a step before you can go higher again, and,
Yeah.
and that's life, we're human. We're not, unless you are monks, living this simple life, then, we've got so many, challenges to overcome on a daily
Yeah.
basis. It's life. We're
Yeah.
busy. Yeah, so
Absolutely. Absolutely.
absolutely, yeah. So I think that's really important. So thank you again for highlighting that.
Yeah.
No, I love that. So how do you think individuals can best support loved ones who may be dealing with trauma?
I would say learn, let's call it the partner. Learn your partner.
Mm, like
It
that.
could be a sibling, it could be a parent, it could be your romantic partner or your life partner. Learn them to know um, when to put the brakes on, when to accelerate, when to be present, when to back away, when to say things that, not the right things, but say things or listen in a way that is best to the best of your ability, best supportive of them.
Mm,
And just getting to know that person. And you may, again, they could be a sibling. You may have grown up with them and you may know them, but maybe knowing them again in this other aspectual way to say, oh my gosh, instance, I don't have any siblings, but my sister is um, fraught with despair, and they seem irretrievably fraught with despair. And so, what I want to avoid is being that preachy, self-righteous kind of healer type that's, oh, come on, we're going to do it together and get out here with me and we're going to go, go, go. Learn and feel that and be more like, well, do you want can I make you some soup right now? Or can I, what can we do? Do you want to go for a walk? And if you want to talk, you can talk. If you don't want to talk, you don't have to talk. So you have to kind of learn. It's like a mixing board that producers use when they make songs. You got to learn your dials with that person, I think. And the more you know that person, again, you could know them as a partner, you could know them as a sibling or a parent, but know them again in a new, fresh way, or in a new perspectival lensing way, to say this person is suffering and they're dealing with something. They revealed that to me. I know this now. Now I have to sort of adjust my priors. I have to update my prior beliefs about this person so that I am more sensitive, more available, and less of whatever it is that they may not need at this stage in their recovery process or their healing process. So you really have to be self-aware enough to be other aware, and know what that self-other relationship, if you can dial it in as best as you can for their needs and their wants at that time, what might be best
Perfect.
for them.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And is there any other kind of insight that you'd like to share? Because we are coming to a close.
The last thing I think that might be important to say, related to what we've kind of been covering the last 20 minutes or so, is, as you said, it's not a linear journey, but it's also, there's never a destination. There's
Mm,
never you,
true.
for me, this is just me, so grant me some, throw a grain of salt at me or whatever. I don't think there's big E enlightenment. I think we can have moments of a light enlightenment, but anybody who claims to be enlightened, I kind of wince. I kind of wince at that. I'm like, don't ever. It's like claiming that you're a genius. Anybody who claims they're a genius, let us know that you're a genius by what you do. Let us know you're enlightened by what you do. So anyway, that's preachy and pedantic, but I would say, know that there is never a destination, that it's all, as long as you're drawing breath, as long as your heart's beating, there's going to be challenges, and there's going to be a continuation of experiencing life and interacting with the world and with other people. And don't be afraid of that, and get to that place where there's no apprehension or concern about that engagement in life. You can be introverted, and you can take it in the doses that are healthy for you. I'm not saying that you should get out there with your cape, your superhero cape, and take on the world, but it's whatever capacity that is comfortable for you. Know that you're continually going to, unless you go become that monk who goes in the cave and meditates for 12 hours a day, which is neat. I mean, and they have retreats. You can go do that, but
Yeah.
most of us have to come back to life and do things.
Okay.
So that's what I would say, is that it's just, bear in mind, there's never an arrival point. There's never a destination. It's just, I
Mm.
like the cliche. It's always the journey.
Always a journey, yeah.
Yeah, it's always
Enjoy
just,
the process. Yeah.
yeah, it is. And fall in love with the process, fall in love with the journey, even the crappy stuff.
Thank
Move through the crappy, and
you.
and maybe one last little preachy thing I'll say is, again, don't embody or inhabit the wise person. Don't embody or inhabit the enlightened person for too long. Allow yourself to be the clown, the fool, the life of the party, the joker. What, just, these are all archetypal roles that we don't want to force upon ourselves. We want to be able to have that fluidity, to move around and be a dynamic person, a multifaceted person, whatever that is for your unique character, your unique personality and psychic signature. That's, for you to discover. That's what self-awareness is. And when you can move through those roles,
Mm.
then life flows a little more easily. And the
Yes.
stress, the adversity, so it's anti-fragility. The adversity is less felt. It is
Yeah.
less impactful. So
Mm.
that'll be my final little preachy thing.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah. And where can my listeners find you?
Well, where I would best wish to steer your listeners is to my podcast. And I'll say that I derive no revenue from this. I will not make a dime for your having coming over to visit me. And I say that because you and I talked before we hit record. I don't want to commodify this. This has no, or at least the show that I do. It's called IdeaCast Interview Series, as you mentioned, and it may be in the show notes. Uh, the guests that I've had there are absolutely amazing, and they've informed a lot of what I was going on and on about here. So go check those people out. I do my best to host them and be a good person to ask questions and stuff like that. But the people I've had there are really amazing, and it's all across the spectrum. I've had people in the arts and music and movies, and that's not super big movies, but just people who make really good film. And I've had professors, again, in these high, lofty philosophical things. And so a lot of people, but there's a common theme, again, sense, purpose, meaning, and, well-being in life, and, thriving, whatever that means. And maybe a little sprinkle of happiness, in that. But again, it's the embodiment of the happiness. It's not continuous. It's just the fluid. So IdeaCast Interview Series, that would be the place I would want to send everybody.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be putting a link into
Okay.
the podcast episode. And I just want to say it's been so fabulous having you on and sharing your insights and your experiences and your teachings with everybody. I just feel like there's so much, depth in the work that you're doing, and there's just so much light in the work that you're doing. I just feel like you're impacting so many people. And I can see that it's coming from such a genuine place, from such
Hmm.
a beautiful heart. So I really salute you on that. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. And I want to acknowledge and thank you for, again, opening up this space for the two of us, and allowing us to share some ideas. Again, I
Mm,
think that's a very spiritual practice,
yeah.
that we want the best for others and for ourselves, but for others as well. So thank you for that. Thank you for that opportunity and for all the work that you do. I want you to
Oh,
uh,
thank
be acknowledged in that, and just know that you are among good people, and I
you.
look forward to us both in our own unique ways, doing what we can to help people. Yeah, just to be
Absolutely.
to change people's lives in
Mm,
whatever way. So
exactly. Oh,
thank you.
yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. And that's all we've got time for today, my beautiful listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you on the next show. Stay blessed, my friend.